Good morning and welcome to the Revolution of Being podcast. Today we're going to jump into a topic that is so deeply personal for really anybody on a spiritual journey, and that is inner child healing. So this is something that, as a hypnotherapist, is my favorite topic with my clients because it is so transformational. And you and I have had an abundance of our own inner child healing work that we've done. And, today's kind of special because I'm coming off the heels of some really intense stuff myself that I even feel a little anxious talking about because it's still very present in my system. Um, but within that, I want to jump into talking about what we can't avoid. And that is the shadow work. That is that our traumas do define us. And that's not a bad thing. It's about alchemizing it. And it's about really being able to look at those wounded parts of us and healing them, sitting with the discomfort. And that's something that, as a society, we're not trained to do. You and I were just having a conversation about consumerism, and what a great topic going into the holiday season, right? Where we are inundated with flashy things all over the place. We are inundated with getting your family, your kids, the best iPhone, the newest, most expensive, technology devices, whatever it is. And a lot of that is really just pulling us away from the work that we need to do within ourselves. And so, Jess, I want to kind of jump into talking about, I think, the aspects of our journey that have been most impactful. And for me, if you guys have listened to this podcast for a few episodes, you've heard us talk about the impacts of our coaches we've worked with, the healing that we've done up to this point. And that was one of the most impactful things I did, about, 4 years ago or so, was inner child work. I had no idea what that was. Now, I've spent many years and thousands of dollars on therapy, since I was probably 16 years old. And at no point did anybody ever mention this concept of inner child. I had no idea what that meant until I started to study the subconscious mind. And so, I was really introduced to it about 4 years ago with my first coach who had us do an exercise. And for those of you curious, this is something I teach my clients and I would encourage you to consider doing. So this coach had us write our life story from birth up until, present time. And within that, he said, write it as though you're writing your life story. So, okay, when I was 5, this happened to me. When I was 10, this happened. When I was 15, this happened, right? And then you go back and you write it in third person. That little girl had this happen. That little girl lost her dad. Holy shit. The distance you put between yourself when you're looking at something no longer in it, but with some distance, allows you to see facets of yourself and understand, I think, the true impact of how difficult those things were that you can't when you're in the middle of it. And that's really the benefit of inner child work is, kind of like we talked about with psychedelics, right? Like you allow yourself just enough distance from the problem to be able to really examine it, to really just take in how much those things truly affected you. And so, I just wanted to get started with that. And then we're going to dive into, I think, some kind of nitty gritty personal details within this, because this is what we want to do is, we're human. We've been through shit. We're going through actively our own struggles. And, we want people to understand, this is the work, right? So I don't know if you have anything, to kind of weigh in. I know we talk about this all the time. So
Yeah. Gosh, it's just there's so many different ways that we can talk about this and so many different avenues we can explore when it comes to this work. In the broadest sense, it is very challenging for people because of a few different reasons. I think that's what I want to tap into next in this conversation. I think you covered it really well, like being able to really kind of put the distance in between and look at it from this distance back and say, shit, look at that. Like, look at that. Here's what kind of blows my mind. And I've done a lot of inner child work and I've done a lot of different ways of doing it. I didn't always know that I was doing that. And it was kind of like peeling back the layers, where you have to start somewhere. And so the first thing is you just have to be willing to talk maybe to somebody about it. Like, you just have to get over that hump of there's something wrong with me. We did a whole episode on, you're not broken. Like, you have to first get to a place where it's like, this is not actually a brokenness. This is just humanness. And if anybody tells you they don't have it, they're just flat out lying to you, because life just doesn't do that. Life gives us experiences that are both good and negative. And if we just keep trying to avoid the negative, we start to overbuild this stuff. So the first thing is, like, can you get to a place where you're saying, I'm not broken and I'm going to go address this somewhere? Maybe it's somebody, maybe it's something, I don't know. But the next part is you have to really examine your inner dialogue. And once I did this, I was just kind of shocked, because my inner dialogue was always just kind of trying to shame that part of me into not existing. I kept trying to find different ways to hack it off, get rid of it, make it go away, make it shut up, make it stop talking to me. And fast forward, I figured that part out. But if you can look at that, and when you're looking in the mirror and you're saying in your mind or in whatever, how you wish you were more of this, and why am I this way, and you're talking to yourself in such a way, putting that distance between you and yourself, and looking at your child. Like, just picture looking at your own child or yourself as a child and saying those words out loud to them. Would you ever? That is where inner child healing starts, because you have to have enough distance from yourself to be able to see the child within you. And that's when we start to look at it differently. That's when we look at in the mirror and we say, you're beautiful, or you're so smart, or look at how far you've come. All the things you would say to your own child. So it took me being able to have children to really see this. My son had told me when he was a little bit older, he's very bright, he's very smart, he's kind of, got this engineering mindset, he's going into some big stuff. And he said, Mom, the reason that I'm so smart? And I said, well, because you are. And he said, no, it's because you told me every day of my life that I was. Now, that is impactful. So I could do that for my child, but I was not doing that for myself. And the reasons why we don't do that for ourselves is so broad, right? Before we started this conversation, we were talking about consumerism, and it's marketing, it's consumerism, it's all the things. And in a nutshell, we were just taught we should be ashamed of mental health things, when it's not, it's just human. We have to process things, come through it. So we were taught to be ashamed of that. Then we were force fed marketing that told us what perfect was. And we were taught to just bypass it and go consume more. We could end the whole episode right now. That's the truth. That's the truth.
Yeah, and to your point, to back it up as you're talking, I think if you're listening to this podcast, you probably understand what inner child healing is. If that's not yet familiar to you, I want to just roll back a second and explain that. So, again, as a listener on this podcast, you probably understand the power of your subconscious mind. So, up until about the age 7 or 8 or so, our little minds are like sponges, absorbing everything around us, how to be in the world, what, is meaningful and important in this world, how we view ourselves and the world. Do we feel safe or not? Do we feel worthy? Do we do things that are shameful, right? That we perceive as being shameful. And so all of that is simply perceptions, okay? So You could have two children in the same home, twins, right? Have very similar lived experiences, but have two very different interpretations of their environment. So it comes down to perception. And that's not to say, if you're in an abusive environment, you shouldn't perceive that as abuse. But if you're in an abusive environment and that's all you know, that could be normal to you and you don't know differently. So we're just kind of making perceptions about the world until we're about that age. And where the wheels can come off is that beyond that age, those are what are running the programs of our lives. And when we go into things that challenge us, our limiting beliefs come flying up. And that's where we have that negative self talk. I'm not worthy of. Who am I to be doing? I didn't grow up with money. Like the way my family showed love was through shopping or buying things. No one ever talked about their emotions. So those are all the times when we have to look at that, right? And when we talk about the inner child, we are literally in adult bodies, but little children running around, essentially, in this world. And our conscious mind only dictates about 5% of our day and our actions. It's our subconscious that's running the show. And so that's the importance of kind of addressing like what aspect of my little Angie is wounded, right? What aspect of little Angie feels scared right now? What aspect of me, or what experience made me believe the world wasn't safe or that I had to be a certain way? And as you said, our children are our biggest mirrors, I think. If our listeners have children, you know that you can parent the same way your parents parented you, or you might be like, fuck no, never again, and do very differently. And I think we can also acknowledge that, you know, and this is what was hard for me to understand was as an empathic person, I can understand why my parents did what they did. And that is wonderful because I can understand them and I can forgive them and I can allow them to be human. What I didn't realize I was doing was completely neglecting the very real impact their actions had on me unknowingly. And I didn't allow myself to grieve. I didn't allow myself to truly feel angry. I didn't know I had that in me still, to feel like just freaking mad or deeply hurt, right? Because as an empathic person, like a lot of us are, we understand, oh, it's their inner child that's hurt. That's why they did what they did. And so, in a respect, I was disregarding a lot of my emotions because I understood where they were coming from, like my parents were coming from. And yet, when I think of my children and I think of if what happened to me happened to them, it broke my heart. It breaks my heart actively to think about that. And because I want my kids to have a different experience. And to be human is to have trauma. None of us are getting out of here without some form of trauma. And it really is being able to address, whether it's through journaling, whether it's somatic work, whether it's, hypnotherapy, which is what I do with my clients, is help them reconnect with that inner child, and what comes through is powerful. And there, you can have that in meditation, you can have that through psychedelics. There's so many ways to do that. Um, but it's all subconscious. So it's, how do you know what's beneath the surface if it's subconscious? And that is why it's valuable to have a professional or somebody or a coach help you navigate that, because we can't navigate our own minefield, right? We need someone with that aerial view who's a neutral observer that can ask the questions that can help us understand what's coming up when we have those, sabotaging beliefs. Or, you and I have talked a lot about even the somatic experience, right? Like how trauma manifests so physically. And it's wild. In someone who, as much as I am full-fledged woo, I am full-fledged analytical, and sometimes I very much struggle to understand how, even though I know, like it's energetic first, right? I struggle to understand and like integrate that. And so, if you're listening to this today, and just know all of us have inner child work to do. It's never ending. And again, it's not that we're broken, but it's that at every level of change we have in our life, a new layer comes up to be looked at. And it might be something we've looked at before, but a different facet of it. And that's the work, and that's what takes courage is sitting with the discomfort and saying, I'm not going to leave you. Sitting with the discomfort and saying, I'm not going to go stuff my face in a pan of brownies. Sitting in the discomfort and saying, I'm not going to go shopping because I want to distract myself or doom scroll. And trust me, I do all that shit still at times, for fairly often, yeah, because I catch myself distracting. We all do. We're programmed to distract. The world we live in programs us to be distracted. But the real courage is when you can catch it and be like, oh shit, no, I'm going to sit with this and just see what's here. And you may not get an answer, but you're going to feel lighter. You're going to energetically be releasing the stuff that's coming through simply by acknowledging it.
Yeah. It is some real work, but it shows up everywhere in your life. So if you're unwilling to do that work, it's going to be very hard to progress to different levels of humanity within yourself. And what you do impacts the collective. So if you want to look at it like when you heal your own inner child, you're healing past generations of wounds. You're healing future generations of wounds. We carry this in our bodies, in our epigenetics. We carry it somatically. You were just talking about a pain in your foot. I was talking about pain that I have in my hip area, which is a huge area of trauma. And we can feel it. It creates disease. So this lie that's been perpetrated that we shouldn't be addressing this stuff on a regular basis, not just like a once and done. Like this is daily, this is often. Look at yourself because if you're finding that you cannot break a pattern, right? So you're constantly walking into dysfunctional relationships, or you have these same scenarios replay over and over in your life, but in different environments. You keep trying to escape it. So you're like, it's the place. I go to a new place and you have the same problems that start up. I guarantee we have to go back. We have to go back in time. So the key is to look for our patterns that show up in our lives. They're what is our belief system around doing this work? Do we try to avoid it? I love shopping, Angie. I love shopping. And shopping looks different for me. It can be Amazon. Now I'm online. And it's especially when I start to get that restlessness of there's something here. I love to eat. I would go eat or shop, and I have to become conscious in that moment. I'll find myself doing stuff, and it's like, whoa, I'm back. What am I doing? I That is how it is. And so we cannot change what we don't see, which is the poison of it all is if we're taught to not look for it, we never see it. We feel it, so we're in dissonance with our entire world, but we never change it because we can't change what we don't see or we don't acknowledge, which is why self-awareness is the catalyst for so many different things that bring humanity up. And this is the inner child work. I know when I had, and I know we haven't really talked about this yet, but I had that experience where I was looking at my own wounds as something that needed to be gotten rid of. They needed to be destroyed. And it was in this kind of like moment of, oh my gosh, that's me looking at the little girl who had terror and trauma, psychological stuff like happened to her, and basically doing exactly what it was always done, which was be quiet, deal with it, move on, go be better. That was the messaging. Go be better. We don't talk about that. We keep that hidden. It was me finally looking at that little girl and giving her the validation that she was screaming for because she deserved it, because she was beautiful and she deserved to be validated in that. Like, you know what? This is hard. That wasn't fair. This is scary. You do have a right to cry. You do have a right to feel left. And that really changed my whole perspective. So now when I catch myself going into the old pattern of it's your fault, you're not good enough, and just cutting myself apart at every angle, subconsciously, verbally, whatever, I stop and I just think, my God, why would I continue the pattern that created that mess? Like, stop it right here and talk to yourself as if you were talking to your own child.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Changes
that's the
everything.
power of yeah, and that's the power of the pattern interrupt, right? The second you catch it, the second you catch yourself going into that trance to numb with Amazon or shopping or food or whatever, that's the power to change it and be like, "Whoa, hold on, pull back. What's going on here? Check in." And same thing with the negative self-talk, I see a lot of people, and we've talked about this fairly often, you and I have, is I get quite disgruntled with my industry, with the hypnotherapy world, because there is this promise of quick fixes as though people get to skate through their challenges. I make you look at them. And you're going to have to look at them and you're going to have to feel it for a moment. It's not that you're going to sit there, but you have a safe person to be with you and look at the shadows. And that's what makes them less scary is you cannot heal what you do not feel, right? Like, I don't know if anyone said that, but I'm going to say it now. You cannot heal what you don't feel. And if you're unwilling to let yourself feel the discomfort, you're never going to transcend it. And there are no bypassing, right? Like there are ways that, hypnosis can help you maximize your brain power and become more of an elite athlete and do all these great things. But you still got to do the work. You still have to do the freaking work. And that's what, all of us are being asked to do right now. And even so much as, you know, the biggest reason why I'm going to say you need to fucking do this is if you're a parent, do your damn work.
Mm,
Because if you're not, your kids are going to pick up on that. You can say all the right things. You can tell your children every single day how beautiful and how perfect and how amazing they are. They are going to understand. They will feel your energy far more than the words you say. And that was what I had with my mother, right? Was she was always so complimentary of us as children, how amazing we are, how smart we are, how beautiful we were. Her self talk was absolutely horrific. What do you think I actually took from her? The words she said to herself, the way she talked about her body, about what made her not good enough, about all these things. Not the kind words she said to me. Like, that didn't mean shit. I received what she said and did about herself. And if anything, like, if you don't want to do it for yourself, fine, don't. Do it for your kids because they are going to perpetuate the same cycles that you have kept alive. And they are going to be a victim of that because you didn't do the work yourself. And again, if you're, I am so convinced because I study people and I understand how different generations have kind of moved through these processes. But if you're anywhere from like 35 to 50-ish, 30 to 50, you are a generational change maker. You are the one where all these traumas keep coming, 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 and you're like, nope, it stops here, and you shift direction. And ideally, those of us that are doing our work allow our children and the younger generations to not have to carry that heavy lifting so they can just come in and do the work they need to do on this planet. And so yes, we are doing heavy lifting, but don't be mistaken, our kids are going to have a lot of work ahead of them. We've left them a planet that is just in such a tough place because of what we've done to it, because we've refused to be connected with ourselves, with nature, with each other. And so, if anything else, do it for your children. Think of those little ones who you might be doing all the right things, but they are picking up how you feel about yourself
yeah,
always. And that's not to shame a parent, right? We can't know what we don't know. But
no.
again, if you're on this podcast listening, you fucking know. Like you're not here because you're curious. There's something resonating within your soul saying, I know I'm being called to do this.
And
And
imagine if everybody took responsibility for themselves in this way, the change would be so fast
mhm.
on a global scale. And you change when you finally do this. You change. Your perception of everything and everybody changes. I can be frustrated with people. They can bother me, they can be wrong, they can make me mad, I can be mad. But I also can see the wound It's not their free pass. It's still their work to do. But here's the thing, it makes me not a victim. It makes me not a victim. So I can still give them grace and compassion without letting them victimize me. Because if we don't do this, like you said, if we don't do this, and especially if you're a parent, guess what you're going to do? You are going to put the potential of more narcissists in our world. That is where narcissistic behaviors most of the time come from. They come from that childhood wound because it has to. We have to protect ourselves. And so we start to put up every defense and we start to understand that it's a take world and we can manipulate this and we can stay safe this way and we can get our needs met this way. That's what we train our children to become. And you see, it's a cycle. So the narcissistic parent didn't deal with their own childhood wounds. They weren't taught, they weren't shown, they weren't whatever. They have the children that pick up the energy, like you said, and they repeat the cycle. And they have the children that pick up the energy and they repeat this. And you see, we get exponentially worse as a society. That is what we're coming out of, by the way. That is what we are being delivered from, which is why these times are very chaotic and confusing because we have people that are going, hold on, wait a minute, this isn't right. And we are starting to deal with it.
And, on that topic, those of us that haven't done our work are raising entitled little brats. Like our children
Narcissist.
don't have boundaries. They don't know the meaning of no. They're running around feeling like everybody deserves a participation trophy for showing up. No, do the fucking work. Earn it. Like I remember having this conversation with our daycare lady and I just love her for this because you know, we need discipline as children. We need structure. That is how we learn about the world, and our children respect us. They know that they can fuck around and find out safely because they have parents, they're helping them. And right now, we have a mess of people and children who are unhealed, who are wounded, who feel profound entitlement, don't know the value of work, of self education, of taking accountability, of dropping the victim consciousness. And it is scary to see. I mean, I think there's a massive upswing of awakening happening. Um, but the entitlement and the behaviors, we saw it play out with politics. It's unbelievable what we're seeing with how people are acting towards themselves and others. And it's like, but this is the work we have to do. And again, it starts within. Like, I can only do what I can do within myself, and that's a reflection outward. And you can only do what's within yourself. And yet it affects everybody and everything too, because we are interconnected. And so, you and I are very optimistic about the future. And, I wouldn't say we're Pollyanna and that we're unrealistically, optimistic, but I think we also see people doing the work and that there is this wave of consciousness arising. And so it feels like you're in the gauntlet and you're slaying demons left and right, your own personal demons, and it's intense. And also it's finally happening though. We're seeing things come up to surface that have been buried for a long time. And that's also manifesting in the collective, right? Like look at what's happening with Hollywood. We're seeing the underbelly of complete insidiousness and evil come up. It's coming up to be alchemized. It's coming up to be healed. It's coming up to have light shown on it. And that's a reflection of all of us too. So it's all happening for us. And with, I'll dive into, and, we can talk just briefly, about the somatic manifestation, because I think this is just worth saying, because, trauma, the body does keep the score. There's a great book about it. There's also one, It Didn't Start With You, which is kind of like a Cliff's Notes version of The Body Keeps the Score, if you're interested. Much easier to read. So we have trauma stored in our body. If we don't deal with it, it can develop into disease. And so, gosh, it was like 2 weeks ago, randomly, almost 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday, I started getting heart palpitations. Now, I've had them very intermittently, like with periods of very high stress or anxiety. like a few palpitations, right? And I'm very in tune with my body, so I can tell when things are not normal. So that happened on a Wednesday. I'm like, well, gosh, this is a little bit unusual. Like, it's not going away. And I was like, okay. And I was kind of reflecting on, the week prior, thinking I've been busy. Like, I was doing a lot of things, but it didn't feel overwhelming. Like, I did not get the cues from my body, like, hey, Ange, this is too much, please stop. So that was on a Wednesday. On a Thursday, they persisted. And I'm like, okay, this is really strange. Like, it's pretty unrelenting here. So, as I would, I cut my coffee. I did kind of the logical things. I was meditating, all my usual practices. I decided to let up on working out. I don't work out excessively. I'd strength train and then walk. Like, it's pretty boring. And so I was like, well, let's just give the body a break, right? So Friday comes, and this was last Friday, so a week and a half ago. And I'm like, this is getting really bad. Like, I'm getting actually quite concerned. And again, if you're a listener who's heard our other episodes, my dad died at 45 of a heart attack. His first heart attack was probably about 36, 37. So right around my age, right? Super not pleasant. And so I had texted a neighbor who was a cardiac nurse, right? I'm a former nurse, but cardiac was not my jam. I did hospice, so this is not my arena. And I'm like, all right, like, what should I do? And she's like, I think you should go to the ER, and like, just get checked out, see what's going on. So I made my way up to the urgency room, and they hooked me up to all the monitors. At this point, I'm getting a little nervous, right? Because I can see the manifestation on the ECG. I can see the erratic heart rate. My pulse is a little bit weird. And so, of course, deeply concerning. And I'm in there and I started to cry because I'm thinking of my children, right? I'm thinking of me when I was their age and how it felt when I lost a parent. And so I was starting to just moreover grieve, like, I'm not afraid of Angie leaving the planet. Angie can go whenever Angie needs to. The effect on my family is what was heartbreaking. And so I'm there praying, like, can you please just find something? Like, maybe I'm low on potassium, maybe something is out of whack. I had absolutely nothing. I had no answers. They were like, we don't know what to tell you. Clearly there's something going on. We don't know what it is. And I'm like, okay, like, I know you can't tell me this, but like, if Angie walks out the door tonight, how likely is it that Angie will have a heart attack or a stroke? And they were reassuring. They're like, you have a normal sinus rhythm, so a baseline rhythm of your heart, in spite of the wonky ECG, everything looks, normal-ish. And, the heart markers are all fine, the cardiac markers. I was like, okay. So they're like, we suggest you follow up with cardiology, get a heart monitoring patch, all this stuff. I'm like, okay. So the palpitations persist Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, went the whole next week. And in that, I'm like praying for answers. I'm like, okay, this came out of the blue. I'm thinking, is it hormones? Is it stress? Like, this is so random. I've never had it last this long. And so meditating, praying, all this stuff. And I think it was Saturday overnight into Sunday, had woken up really early. It was like 3 a.m., couldn't sleep. And so I'm like, I'm going to meditate. I'm just going to pray. Like, show me a sign of what's going on here. What am I missing? I don't understand. And ended up falling asleep. Well, had a dream where a friend who's a really phenomenal healer was in the dream. Long story short, there was a being there with her. And this being said, in order for you, you need to die to the old to allow the new. And they were like, do you agree? Are you going to do this? And I was like, well, no, like, what am I dying to? Right. My analytical mind kicks in and I'm like, what am I agreeing to? Like, sure, I'm good with this, but like, can you give me more details? And that's very much how I am in real life too, like outside of dream time. And so it was really interesting because I just was like, well, that's such a profound message. I don't know what that means. Well, I ended up seeing this person on Monday and I was like, I need a session with you. She does inner child work as well. I can't do that on myself. I need someone else to help me with this, right? So had set up for a session with her on Thursday. I had a session with her this past Thursday. So we're recording this on a Monday. I have not had palpitations since. So what came through was anger and grief, which manifests at your heart. My body was working on purging those old emotions from when I was little, when I didn't have a voice, when I felt deep shame. I came into this planet a very highly sensitive kid. And imagine being a highly sensitive person in a very volatile and very like kind of violent environment with parents always yelling, incredible amounts of tension, feeling shamed because the only way I knew how to cope was to suck my little thumb and I had my little blankie, and then that was shamed because that's not what we do, right? And I had no copes. I had no copes. And on top of that, I had, before it was even a thing, sensory processing disorder. I was that kid where my underwear were scratchy. My socks made me want to crawl out of my skin. My clothing was crunchy. Everything was so uncomfortable. And so I just like didn't have outlets when I was little. So what do? You internalize, right? Because little girls don't cry, little girls don't yell, they don't get angry. And if they do, they get spanked and abused essentially. And so in this session with this healer, all of this was coming through, like just crazy amounts of emotion that I was releasing. And it was absolutely profound. And when I say I have not had a palpitation since, I'm like, the analytical mind is like, how is that possible? The spiritual side is like, of course you understand. Like, you had to let that go. And it was manifesting because it was ready. And so, when you and I talk about these physical sensations, our bodies are always telling us, like, tune in. And I can't do this work on my own, right? I will sometimes get hints in meditation that I'm meant to follow through on, but sometimes I need the support of a different person with a neutral lens who can help guide me on asking the questions, helping me get to point zero of what that cause was. And so it was very profound. And I haven't told a lot of people this story because a lot of people think it's nuts, right? Don't understand the spiritual component of the manifestation of these symptoms. And so, feel privileged listeners that you're hearing this story. I'm just kidding. But really, like, it's profound how our body does manifest that which we're unwilling to look at, or we just don't know yet that it's there, right? My
Yep.
body was clearly saying, like, Ange, it's time. You've done enough work. Now you get to look at this. And I'm
Yep.
grateful for that. Was it scary? For sure. Like, very,
Mhm.
very scary. Because again, not because Angie is going to leave the planet, but because of what it would mean for my family. So that's just a kind of a longer story, I suppose, of my recent experience with this very, very personally. And, tune in. Have someone you can talk with that can help guide you. And I'm going to just say this, and this might piss some people off, but fuck it. Your standard therapist is not going to know what to do with this. You're going to need someone who is in the spiritual realm, whether it's a somatic practitioner, a hypnotherapist, a Reiki practitioner, or someone who is trained in this with a spiritual lens. Because again, the standard therapist, and there are many amazing therapists out there, they are not trained to understand that it's still very Western medicine. The DSM diagnoses, and there's not this holistic view necessarily in a lot of cases, but that's not to say all. So if you have a therapist who understands, cherish them, love them, hold on tight. But if you don't, find somebody who works in the 5D that can help you, because um, you need someone that can help you get to that soul level.
Yeah, it's not so this is where people get really tripped up. They get really tripped up with this conversation. And the reason I'm going to just say this, the reason people get tripped up is because we are really taught that the body is separate or not connected to the soul. Schools, Western medicine, churches, they all perpetuate the same lie. So
Mhm.
it's absolutely normal that this feels like foreign on every level because you are not taught this.
Well, and
You are not
even the mind, right? We have mental
yes,
health, which isn't
yes,
integrated with physical health.
right.
We have doctors who specialize in kidneys, but don't look at the whole body. Doctors who specialize in the heart, but not the whole system. That's how our system's designed. Even so much as the mind is not a part of the body, and
Yep,
what's happening in the mind doesn't affect the body. Of course it does. And I think a lot of people in the mental health field, if they've been in there long enough, would say that's bullshit. Like, of course it
yes,
does. Like, we see it. You
yes.
can't deny what you see all the time, but that's how we are trained. And yeah, the soul's not even part of that. Like, that's
It's
just
by design. This and I want people to understand that if we don't believe we can connect to that, then we're never going to search for that within ourselves. And that is a design by a system. You have to fully understand that. And then you have to start to understand that energetics rule the universe. Everything is energy. We are energy. We are an energetic system. And so if you fully start to understand energetics and our organs. Chinese medicine, they had this down eons ago. They understood like what the liver represents. It's the seat of anger, right? So if you're carrying a lot of anger, look to your liver. Look to that detox pathway. Your kidneys, these are purification systems. Our bodies energetically hold on to emotions because emotions are energy and we're energy, and it shows up as dis-ease. Once you fully understand that, you'll understand what we're referring to here and why this is incredibly important. The Western diagram for healing is not made for this body. And there are things that are beautiful that have come out of that. It's not that we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There is beautiful stuff that can come out of Western type medicine, but we have to integrate with the Eastern philosophy and we have to understand the energetics of the human. And so you had mentioned The Body Keeps the Score is a phenomenal book. If this all feels like a little bit to you, I recommend that book because if you're dealing with chronic pain, if you're dealing with chronic illness, anything like that, chances are you're dealing with some inner child healing that needs to be done. And your ability to self reflect is going to be your strength, and you might not be able to start with the self-reflection in whole. As you grow as an individual, you should be able to overcome that through different avenues and modalities that you were touching on, such as, you know, therapists that are trained in the somatics. I was fortunate enough to have a therapist for many years that totally understood that. And she brought it out of just the mind, and we're not going to address the body. And she showed me the whole, and that was breathtakingly wonderful because I felt it internally. So I know we're having some technical difficulties today, shocking as Mercury is approaching retrograde. Um, so maybe we should wrap up here, Ange. And I think this is one of those subjects too that we can touch on more. I want to encourage our listeners to leave comments if they want to dive deeper.
Yeah, any topics that, you're interested in learning more about, please let us know because we have a vast knowledge of experience personally and professionally and are happy to share our wisdom with you. It's a part of what we're very passionate about, which is, helping you have a gentler journey than we did, right? So if any of our lessons and learnings can allow you to bypass a few steps that make your life a little easier, please take some of the gems that we've learned. You and I know at the core of us, we are teachers, and part of our mission and path has been to go through a lot of shit so we can help people with it. And we've been through a lot, so happy to help as we can. So we'll see you next time. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you, and we'll catch you later.
Thanks, guys.